Hey, this is Dan from UserSpice.com, and if you haven't watched the previous video that was Form Builder Basics 1 of 2, highly recommend you watching it. I'm going to start off by saying the same thing in this video that I did at the other one, and that is the Form Builder is a great tool. You may run into some limitations. It's not a complete replacement for being able to write PHP code. It's good for simple forms. It's great that if you update a form on the form builder, it automatically updates on all your pages and all of that kind of stuff. There are some limits, but it also has some pretty advanced features. And so we're going to go back and we're going to look at those advanced features. And so if we scroll up to the top here, you can see that there's some code for advanced form processing, and that's right here. And so we're going to look at this. And so let me back out here for a second. I pasted that code in here, and you'll see what happens is before we were just doing process form like this, and just that was what was processing the whole form. But now what we're going to do, we're going to break the process up into two parts. So we're going to have a pre-process that's going to check to see if the form is valid. And then we're going to do some other things if the form is valid. And then we're going to post-process the form, which is actually what goes in the database. Now, we could just read the documentation, but I really want you to see what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this response and I'm going to dump it so you can see what's in there. So we're going to come here to the form, and we're going to come to this thing, and I'm going to refresh the page, and I have an unexpected there. So let's see, if not empty post. I feel like that's saved. Let's see here. Let's try it again. Unexpected on line 11. Let's see what we got. So if not empty post, what's the problem there? Okay, so we're missing a semicolon here. Okay, so it happens. All right, so if we come back here to this main page, refresh the page, you'll see that we're going to submit this, and nothing is going to go in the database. So I'm going to do Kimmy, and I'm going to submit it. And what's going on up here, you can't really see. I don't know why that's hidden up there. We'll echo a couple breaks in there. Make sure to bring that down. And let's refresh the page one more time.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
My girl in the back's talking. So, okay, so I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to do Kimmy. And now you'll see that form valid is true, and she passed all the validation. Like one of the things that we did when we built the form in the last one is that it had to be at least 3 characters. The token check, which is a security check, is true. And then you'll see that the fields that it got, the information that it got, was it got Kimmy as the username. Now you'll see if I were to go in here and do KI, it would give, and it's not going to show our errors because I just put all those breaks in there. But normally it would show you an error up here, and then it would say form valid is false because it failed the validation. The token check was still true, and this is what you submitted. So the reason for all that, and we're going to come back here to the code. I can get rid of those breaks now at this point. So what happens is, in fact, we'll go ahead and move this whole string. As long as it's above the form, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to put it inside the container just so you guys can see the errors a little bit better. Okay, I know I could, I see. Okay, so anyway, basically I'm dumping the response, and it was showing that when I did KI, that the data was not sufficient. It did not pass validation. So 3 characters required, and it tells you that it failed validation and all that kind of stuff. So why is this important? What's the problem with just doing the process form? Well, the problem comes in that you want to be able to do some more advanced things other than just taking whatever information they're giving you. So if I look here at this form, I can see 2 things. I can see the exact form itself, and I can see that there is a hidden one called demo form, which could be changed. And I can see, let's see, is there a user ID one? I thought there was a, okay, let's see here. Form action. So I'm not seeing the, I thought we had a hidden one in there called user ID. Maybe it doesn't even display those in there. That's fine. So what could happen is somebody could come in here and could change this to something else and submit it. In fact, I'll go ahead and do it. If I submit that, then you'll see that what happened was I was able to manipulate that and have Dan's form come in here. And so what we're doing is we're checking to make sure that all this information is valid. And so let's come in here with this and look at what we have here. In this column, we have user ID. Now, we're not doing anything with user ID. Now, it would be super easy for me to make another form field where you would say, hey, what's your user ID? But there would be no way to validate that that is the actual user ID of the person. So if you look here, and this will make sense in a second, I have this line right here. We're going to grab this. We're going to go back to the code, and we're going to see that in here I have this thing that says if form valid equals true, then you can do something here. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to set the response. So we have this variable here called response, and we want to set the response fields, the user ID, which is the column in our database. Let's double check that. So the column in our database is called user ID with no underscore. So we'll change that. Okay, user ID equals user data ID. Now, why does this matter? Because this is the ID of the logged in user, and this is coming from the server. This is not coming from the user at all. This is the fact that they entered their username and password correctly is what gives us this variable, which means that we can pass this in there and be absolutely sure that this has not been manipulated. And then that information will go in the database. So let's try it again. Okay. Come here and we do Kim. Now, that's my user ID. Now, obviously, this is not my name, but I could enter whatever I wanted. That's my user ID, and there's no way for the user to manipulate that. And so that's really important. If you ever want to pass information that you want to absolutely guarantee is coming from the logged in user, then you go to the form manager and come to form manager. And you'll see that on this form, what we did was we created user ID, and that's a hidden field. So if you look at this, the type in here is hidden somewhere, wherever it is. I guess you can't change that, but it is hidden. And so the way that information is coming in is from the user's table on the database, not the user's input. And that is a huge deal for security. Okay, let's go back to the documentation here, and we'll see that there's some other things that we can do, and you can pass some options to your form when you're displaying it. So I'm going to copy this because this is a little harder. So we're going to come here and we're going to come to this, and we're going to do options. And my code's a mess, by the way. So we're going to paste this in here, and I'll walk you through this in a second. First of all, let's get rid of this. Let's Control A. Okay, and edit lines, auto indent. There we go. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're not just doing display form, but we're doing display form options. And what this allows us to do is to say, for instance, we can edit the submit button to say, submit your name. We can add a class to it. So if you look, when we go back to the other one, we were just displaying just a basic white submit button, and now we can refresh the page and it's green and it says submit your name, and it still works. Just like before, we're not passing the ID there anymore. So we have the ability to make changes like that. Let's take a look at some of the other options. We can do, let's try this. I haven't done this in a while. let's do no close equals 1. And so what that does is that's going to leave the form tag open at the end so we can do some more things custom. So let's minimize this. And then we're going to come back here and let's get rid of that one. We'll just do a new options. Okay, we can actually just, I think we can just pass that right there. Okay, so let's just see what happens right now. I don't think it's going to break anything. So, okay, let's refresh the page. Okay, so nothing's actually broken at this point. But what we can do now is we can come in here to this form thing, and we can assume that the form tag is still open. So we can go input type equals text, name equals, we'll do user ID. I guess we should do number. Okay, now we might have to put our own submit button. It's been a while since I've done that, but let's just see what happens there. I don't think so. So let's come back to this, refresh the page. Okay, now that brought that down there. Let's just see what happens. So, okay, my formatting is wrong, but basically it did add that other form thing in there. So what I think we would want to do is also pass the option of no submit. So let's do this. Let's try passing this. And let's see what happens. See if it bumps that form thing up. Again, I haven't used this in a long time, so I'm just kind of walking you guys through it with me. Okay, so that's still down there. So let's try one more thing. Let's try moving this input thing up here. Oh, duh. Man, you guys are all probably yelling at me. It should be here. Let me get that outside the PHP tags. Okay, man, my brain is fried today. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, so we could do no submit and put the submit button at the end, but for now I'll just leave it here, and you'll see it goes in there like that. So that allows us to do some extra options. Now what we could do is if we wanted to move the submit button down to the end, we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll do comma no submit 1, and then we'll come down here and do input submit submit, and then we'll do, there we go. Now I actually look like I know what I'm doing. So save it and minimize this, and now you're always going to get the token error when you just refresh there. But see, now we can actually do that and have it at the end, and it should actually submit. So let's try it. Yep. So in that situation, if you're not understanding what you're doing, let's say that you wanted to do something really complicated on a form that our form builder wouldn't allow you to do, then you can just tell it no submit, and you can add these extra form inputs or do whatever you want at the bottom of the form, and it's not really a problem. Now, I probably should have dragged this form tag up here just for neatness, but that's what's going on there. So let's go back and we'll look at some more documentation. Let me close this. We don't need that anymore. Look at some more documentation. So debugging forms. So you have this idea of debug equals 1. So let's see what happens there. If I come here and let's see, process form, so we should be able to get rid of all this. Okay, so now we put the debugger in there. In fact, we'll get rid of all these options and just kind of bring it back to a vanilla form. We'll get rid of these. Great. Okay, so we have our basic form, and we're just doing process form with debug equals 1. And so now we come back here, refresh the page, we'll get the token error. Okay, and we'll do... Now there's nothing to debug, but if there was, which I don't really know how we could throw an error at this point, but all that debugging information would pop up here, but there is no debugging information to pop up. Anyway, that's how that works. So, okay, multiple forms on one page. This is something that gets people all the time. So now, what would happen is, if you want to have multiple forms on one page, the problem comes in with the token, and basically what happens is each one of these forms is generating its own token. So let's get rid of this debug thing. And what you would do, and I'm not going to go through the whole process, but up at the top of the page before you do, let me think here, after your form processor, but before your form. So after your if not empty post, but before your form, you want to generate your token. And then what you're going to do is in each of these forms, you are going to, if you had multiple forms on the page, you are going to do options token equals token, and then you're going to pass this options array in. And what that will allow you to do, so if I were to do display form, what's the other one called? Crons? Okay, so if I were to do that, that would allow both of those forms to work on the same page without throwing a token error. So now we have two forms on there. This one submits. This one, I guess that's a 1. I guess that should be a date. Created by, okay, so now we're going to submit this. And we're not doing anything to redirect the page, but I'm guessing if you come in here to crons, yep, you'll see that other one I just created. And so basically both of those forms worked on the same page, even though there was no, without the token conflicting. So I think there's a couple more things. Updating instead of inserting. So let's just say here that, let's take a look at this here for a second. So this one's a little trickier to explain, but I'm going to bring this into the code. So let's say you have a table, and in fact, let's look at our table here for a second. Let's look at the existing one that we have. That is going to drive me crazy. Okay, so our existing table, we have this one happens to have a user ID of 1. That's unique. So let's just say that we know that Kim is logged in or whatever. 1 happens to be my user ID, so that kind of makes it a little bit easier to do this. So let's come back to the code and let's get rid of this one here. And we're just going to paste this bit here that I said to get. Okay, so let's just say that I have this magic variable, and I do. This magic variable will work on all the UserSpice forms. And I want to put user data ID, which I know that that's my user ID. Now, what we're doing, this always works by row, so you can forget the other one, but I'll just show you what's going on. So right now this is working by row, so if I have process form, great. So the options that I want to pass are which row I want to update. And so I'm going to do this, process form, and then I'm going to do options. Okay, so display form, and then we're going to do this. So I'm going to break this down in a second here. Get rid of all this. Okay, so display form name. Let's get rid of all of this. All right, so now that you've seen that craziness, what's happening here is we are telling them that the row we want to update is the one that is my user data ID. Now, you could, normally what would happen would be you would run a query. So let's do that. Okay, That's going to make more sense for you guys. So let's take a look at this. Let's come back and look at our database. I'm going to take my time. Buckle up. We're gonna go through this real quick. So if I come into the database and I see that on the demo form, okay, I have one where the user ID is 1. There's only one of them. So what we're going to do, we are going to tell this form which row to update, and the one we want to update is the one with the ID of 1. So let's do this right. We're going to say row equals db query select ID from demo form where user ID equals question mark. And then what we're going to do in this situation, we're going to pass in my user ID, user data ID. And then, okay, let's do it this way. We're going to call just the query first. Okay? And then we are going to come in here. We're going to assume that we're supposed to be updating. So we're going to do row count equals row queue count. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we get a response. So if there is a row, let's do this, row C is greater than 0, then we're going to do all this stuff. Then we're going to do row equals row queue first. So we're going to grab the first one where that matters. So we're going to go in the table and we're going to say, give me the ID where the column user ID matches my user ID. Now, if that exists, then we're going to do row equals that first row. And so the problem is right now, the answer, we're good with that. So what we're going to say is if, all right, and then we're going to say else, die, you are not part of this form. Okay, so what's happening is we're going to the database, finding the row that matches my user ID, and if it exists, we're going to get it, and if it doesn't, we're going to kill the thing. And so now what we want to do is we want to tell it that the row it needs to update is row ID. And the reason for that is because we selected ID. So when we assigned it here, we could have selected 20 things. But in this situation, we just selected ID. So we want to get the row ID that we returned here. So now we're going to update this row that we found there. And if that row doesn't exist, we're going to kill the page. And I think this is going to work. So let's minimize here. And now you'll see that Kim is 1. And so if I go Joe like that and submit, you're going to see that it went in here and it found the row that already had 1 in it and it updated it with Joey. So now I can do Dan Joey and that's going to come in, and I can do Dan Joey, and you know, like all of that. I can keep updating that one row, and me as a user, I only have access to that one row. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. We can answer some questions in the forums or in our Discord. If you're not part of the UserSpice Discord, you're really missing out. You can get relatively quick answers, both from me and Brandon, the other developer, and just a whole community of people who love helping you out. So anyway, I hope this video is helpful. Again, it's not a polished production. It's just me kind of walking through some of this stuff. Thanks for watching.